7 o'clock, well, 2 minutes after. Apologize for that. Thank you everyone for coming to our forum tonight. What we're going to do is give you an overview of the building that's going up for a vote on Monday, a week from yesterday, for funding. We have Stuart Roberts from Johnson Roberts Associate, who is the lead principal architect. Tim Dorman from NV5, who is the project manager from the owner's project manager, who is our representative in the process. Ben Buttrick is the chair of our finance committee. Chief Paul Francis is our police chief. Chief Doucette of the fire department may come later. His daughter is getting discharged from the hospital, so timing's not working well for him this evening. I'm Lisa O'Donnell. I chair the town building committee. So what we want to do tonight is we're going to have the architects give an overview of the building. We'll give a little bit about cost and schedule, and then there'll be time for questions, which is mainly why you're here. First, I want to preface with a little bit of background about how we got where we are and what the next steps are ahead of us. So a year ago, in 2018, we had a town meeting, a vote about the village properties that did not pass. So then the town building committee and the board of selectmen sort of regrouped and began to look at other opportunities for where we could put the police and or fire stations. We started to look at town-owned property, which consists mainly of a parcel on John Wise Avenue that abuts the cemetery, and Memorial Park, which is right across the street here, which also includes the parcel that is the existing fire station. We looked at both of those starting off, and then we had an opportunity to talk to a residential landowner about potentially getting his property, and that kind of went back and forth and didn't work out. But in the process, we realized that we needed to look at all of the appropriate properties in the central town area where the fire department needs to be located for response time. We have a call fire department, so it's not only about the firefighters responding to a call, it's also about the volunteers coming from wherever they are in town to get to the station and back out to a call. So there's a certain area in town that it needs to stay within. With the help of the architect and project manager, we looked at virtually every piece of property in town that would be large enough, would have suitable access, suitable utilities. There are a couple of criteria there that we need to consider as well. We probably approached 6 or 7 different property owners, homeowners, landowners, to ask about their property, and we didn't find anyone who was interested in selling their property. So after that process, looking at a bunch of different sites, and all that information is on the town website. In the meeting minutes, there's all of the visuals from every meeting that we've had. So if anyone wants to go back and look at what we looked at, it's all there. So then, after not having any success finding separate property that the town could purchase, we came back to looking more closely at Memorial Park site and the John Wise Avenue site. We pretty much eliminated the Memorial Park site for a number of reasons, and most of those turn out to be financial reasons because it ends up being much more expensive to build there than it would be at the John Wise Avenue site. And a lot of that has to do with staging construction around the existing station and providing a home for the fire department for up to 18 months, which requires a heated building, and we have nowhere to actually put that. In addition, the bottom of that property at the bottom of Shepherd Memorial Drive is in a floodplain, and we would have to replicate the floodplain at the back of the ball field by digging out land and building up the station, and there's a lot of site work and things like that that went into that design that made it much more cost prohibitive than the current site that we're looking at, which is the John Wise Avenue site. So we landed on the John Wise Avenue site. Sorry, I should back up one second. There were 2 steps in this process before we even got there. In August of 2018, we held a special town meeting and appropriated funds to hire an owner's project manager. And then at the fall town meeting in November, we repeated the same process and hired a project architect. For a little background in how that process is done under state guidelines is that you don't bid that work out as a cost, so it's not a low bidder gets your work. both the owner's project manager and the architect submit qualification packages to the Board of Selectmen and the Town Building Committee. We review those, pick 3 finalists, interview those 3 finalists, and then pick the firm that we're most comfortable with, that is right size for our project and has the experience and knowledge that our project requires. So between August and November, we hired NV5 as owner project manager and Tim Dorman as that representative. Then with NV5's help, we selected Johnson Roberts Associates and brought them on board. So with those, after November, then we did this sort of site search between November and February. February of this year, we had another special town meeting that was exclusively about assigning the property where the public safety building would go. There were 2 articles heard then. One was to transfer control of the parcel of the cemetery lot that abuts John Wise Avenue from the Department of Public Works, which controls the cemetery, to the Board of Selectmen exclusively for use as a public safety building site. In addition, there was another article where we had the opportunity to purchase the abutting residential property at 11 John Wise Avenue, and that was also approved. So now, with the purchase of that property, the site that the town owns was increased by 50%. So that gave us a much larger parcel of land. With that in hand, we began the sort of schematic design process where we looked at a lot of different ways that the building could lay out. In that process, the architects realized that because the way the site slopes from John Wise Avenue to the cemetery is about a 16-foot grade drop. So to build a 1-level building, you would actually have to build a retaining wall and do a lot of fill in that area. Whereas if we were actually to put 2 departments in there with what you'll see in the presentation, the police department underneath the fire department, we could fit both departments on that same site with not, it actually realizes about a $2 million savings over building a separate facility for the police either at the existing location or somewhere else. So it made a lot of sense to us to be able to combine the 2 departments in a single facility. The addition of the property, as Stuart will go over, also gave us the ability on 133 for the fire engines to be able to pull completely off the road before they need to back into the station, which works out well architecturally. Then the engine bay doors aren't facing the street, they're on the side, and you'll see that in the presentation. So that's sort of how we've gotten to the point where we are. Schematic design was taking place early this spring, and there was an estimate done at that stage, and people may be well aware before town meeting there was a number of 17.5 million floated for the station. We were going to have an article at town meeting that was going to ask to fund the whole project then, but between the Board of Selectmen and the FinCom and the Town Building Committee, we weren't entirely comfortable with that number. It was high, and it was also based on schematic design. And in this process, there are 3 stages of design. There's the schematic design where you sort of rough out what's going where, how it's all going to fit, square areas, what the building's going to look like. And then there's a design development stage where once that general layout is completed, it's more refined and detailed, and when everyone is happy with that process, then they go into construction documents where the design is set and they spend all their time creating a set of plans that the builder will work from. So, excuse me, right now we're at the tail end of the construction document phase. Town meeting is the 23rd, Monday the 23rd, and on September 25th, that Wednesday, excuse me, the construction documents will be ready for bid. So the design is done. We're ready to go to bid. It all hinges on financing of the project on the 23rd. Even if it doesn't pass on Monday the 23rd, we will hear it again at fall town meeting. What that does is we'll still bid the project, but if the bidders know that the project has been funded, it'll be a much more competitive bid than if we have to bid the project without the contractors knowing that the funding is in place. They're going to be a lot more conservative in their bids. They're not going to go as hard after the project. We probably won't get as good bid prices. So that's another motivation to look to fund it on the 23rd. So that's sort of a little bit of background about how we got where we are. I just wanted to make clear, like, where the design that we're presenting tonight is really, this is the design that's been done. After the $17.5 million estimate in May in the schematic design phase, the architect and owner's project manager worked very closely with both the fire and police departments to really tighten things up. And in that process, reduced the scope of work and the size of the building, and a lot of, we made decisions about HVAC and a lot of different things that were sort of value engineering steps where we were really trying to tighten up the cost. And in that process, the price came down over $1.5 million. So in May, the project architect and owner's project manager were funded through the completion of construction documents. And that article was about $500,000 this past May. So the estimate that's going to be presented this evening is $15.5 million for complete construction, which includes construction on the site work and then all the fitting out of the station as well, with all the necessary fixtures, equipment, furniture, that sort of stuff. So anyway, that's where we are. I'm going to turn it over to Stuart from Johnson Roberts, who's going to sort of give you the architectural overview and a little bit more background about their process in this.
Okay, great. Thanks. I'm just going to walk you through the design. Just to remind everybody, we're finishing the construction documents, which is a great big thick set of drawings. We have drawings not only from the architects, but there are drawings from the structural engineer and the mechanical engineer and the electrical engineer and the plumbing engineer and the civil engineer. So it's a very comprehensive set that really describes everything. And in addition to that, there's a specification booklet that's about this thick, double-sided, that calls out all the materials and procedures that need to happen in order to make the project a reality. So I just say that just because there's been a lot of work that's gone into the project to date. So I thought I'd actually start. I'm going to go back to where we were in schematic design. These are some computer models that we did of the building, and it's substantially the same. There have been some small detail changes as we worked through refinements. But basically, this would be the view that you'd see from John Wise Ave. So we have 4 fire bays, and the fire station is on the upper level, and the police station is then down on the lower level. So this is what you'd see. We've really tried to take the building and break it up to make it, we think, fit in better with the neighborhood that it sits in. We're trying to really make it look like kind of a collection of farm buildings instead of one big building that's could potentially be out of character with the neighborhood. So this is what you'd see as you come down John Wise Ave. As you kind of pull in front of the building, this gives you a sense of what you see from the street. This is the fire station. This we'll talk about a little bit. This is the training room. At one point we had looked at using the barn that is currently at 11 John Wise Ave, but in the end we have not done that. But this is a new building that kind of looks like what the barn looks like. As we come around to the other end, this would be that training facility. There's an entrance on the upper level, which really could serve both the police or the fire departments, and we have parking on this side of the building. And then as you go around to the back, you can really see the difference in grade. As Lisa said, there's about 16 feet of grade, natural grade difference between the front of the site and the back. That presents some challenges, but it also gave us the opportunity that we could do a 2-level building and use that slope to the advantage of being able then to place the police department in on the lower level of the building. So as you come around to the back of the building, this is what it looks like. And again, we've tried to break it up into a series of smaller looking buildings. So we'll take a look at the site plan here, site plan and landscape plan. Just to orient you, this would be John Wise Ave coming down in here. This is the piece of property that is part of the cemetery. Cemetery's back here, right? So coming to here, here's John Wise Ave, and this is 11 John Wise Ave. This is the piece of property that was acquired. What that does for us is it gives us a big enough site that we can accommodate the fire trucks without pulling out directly onto John Wise Ave. And the issue isn't so much the pulling out, it's the getting back into the station. What the fire department didn't want to have to do is to have to back trucks in off of John Wise Ave back into the fire station. So by rotating the fire bays 90 degrees, we're able to get them out and onto John Wise Ave safely, and they can come back and then they can back in, so we don't have to stop traffic to back up fire trucks on John Wise Ave. Now the building itself, I'll just kind of explain in general, it's really composed of 3 parts, right? One part is the fire station, one part's the police station, and the third are shared facilities. And one of the advantages of doing a combined facility like this are those shared facilities. So we have the training room, we have a conference room, we have a physical training room, a gym, so everybody can stay in good physical shape. But that means, since it's a combined facility, we only have to build one set of that. We're not building a training room at both the police and the fire station, or training rooms and conference rooms. So we were able to save some square footages by doing that kind of combined facility. This is set up when we get into the plans. You can see there's an entrance that would come in at the upper level, and that would give you access to both floors, or there's also an entrance that would come in from the lower level that would give you access to both floors. So the site plan itself is set up. We have the building located fairly close to the street. The grade drops off right down and comes down to the back. So we tried to take advantage of that in planning the station. This area would be up high. So we have some parking here for fire personnel. There's an extra entrance that comes in. These are all the apparatus bays. And so we have sort of the working part of the fire station. This is the offices and some of those things down at this end. I'll get into that a little bit more. But we have parking here, which is close to the apparatus bays, and we have plenty of parking down on this side. So the public coming in, or people who might be coming in when it's not an emergency, might park here. We've tried to work with the existing grades. If you, as you know, the street, we're probably at the high point right up about here, and it drops off, probably about 4 feet by the time we get down to this part of the site. So we're coming in and continuing on down so that we get access to the lower part of the site down here. So what you're seeing here, there's some parking that's associated with, for police vehicles, some parking that would be associated with the lower level. So this is all down at that lower level. To manage water, we met with the Conservation Commission, and they requested that we do some detention areas. So we have a couple of areas that would catch water and hold it. So we're not increasing have a lot of runoff coming off of the site. And these are landscape. We're going to have wildflowers in here. So it all looks very natural. There is one small detention area that would be located under the parking. Then new landscaping. On the back here, the cemetery, I think, comes along right about in here. So there's some existing trees that are going to stay back in here, but we're adding new trees all along the back to help with screening. We're adding more trees here, which also help screen both the building and the parking from the rear. We're adding trees on both sides of the property, so we have screening from the neighbors, and then some street trees and a little bit of landscaping up front. We wanted to make sure that we had good visibility for the fire trucks coming out from the front, so everything that we have up in here is low planting, and we have the trees further back on the site. There's some handicap parking up the upper level and at the lower level, so coming in the building, you'd come right in there. So that's basically how the site is organized. Kind of a challenging site to deal with that much grade change, but by doing this kind of double level building, I think we were able to capitalize on that and make that work for us. There's one civil engineering plan. I'm not going to really talk much about this, but this gets into some of the technical details. Then we'll get into the building plan. So this is the upper level. Upper level, again, we have the 4 apparatus bays. These are set up so that they can get 2 trucks in, so they're double bays. And this is really set up, this is for your existing fire equipment. This is not some expansion that you're going to be buying a lot more trucks to fill this up. You already have the equipment in here. We're just providing a place to house all of that. The area around the outside are really support areas that support the functions that happen in the apparatus bay. So we have, for instance, up in here, we have a decontamination room. So if a firefighter is coming back from a call and they've been covered with materials or toxic substances, they can get decontaminated. There's a place to clean their bunker gear. This is storage for bunker gear. We have some apparatus storage, workshop, some other storage, and a dispatch radio room located up at the front. So all of this is really kind of support for that part of the station. One of the things we try to do in designing fire stations is we want to design healthy fire stations. Firefighters have an incidence of cancer that is several times the national average because they go out to events and they get exposed to all kinds of toxic materials in a fire. And I think for many years, firefighters would just kind of come back and they'd brush themselves off and go about their business. But times have changed, and we're trying to promote health by promoting a healthy fire station. So we want to provide these areas where they can decontaminate, and then we set up a station, so we're going to try to keep any of the nasty stuff that might be brought back and might be in the apparatus bay from migrating back into the other parts of the station. So we have mechanical systems with pressurization. So there's higher pressure in this zone. It goes through a little neutral corridor and then to the apparatus bay. So air can't flow from here to the corridor and can't flow from the corridor into here. It's all flowing the other way, and that's to try to keep the corridors as clean as we can and keep those contaminants at a minimum. So if you're coming back into this part of the station, this is set up. We have locker rooms and individual changing rooms here. The reason for doing this is so that we can accommodate female firefighters in a flexible way. So rather than build a certain number of male lockers and then a locker room and female lockers and another one, and then as the mix changes, there's no flexibility. What we do here is we have a shared locker room that's for storage of clothes only, and then they're individual changing rooms. So that gives the facility the flexibility to have no female firefighters, one or half the force could be females. So that's really for flexibility. We have, there's a day room up here on the front, so this is a place that they can congregate during the day. There's a kitchen facility. We have some bunk rooms back here that are primarily would be used if you had a catastrophic event. So if you have a hurricane or a bad snowstorm or something, and we need to have emergency personnel on site around the clock, there's a place for to accommodate them up in here. The offices are located up at the front of the building. So if you're coming in the building as the public, you'd come through a vestibule, and you come into a public lobby. And from this public lobby, you have access to the training room, because this would be for fire, police, could be for other uses within the town. So this is all secured, so you can't get into the fire station without getting buzzed in at this door. And then we have 2 toilet rooms, so all of this can kind of function on its own. Then there's an elevator and a stair that takes you down to the lower lobby, or if you came in on the lower floor, you can take the elevator and the stairs up to the main level. So really, both of those entrances work as entrances to both parts of the station. So this is that shared facilities component, and this is the fire station component. As we go downstairs, the police station is really kind of on the low side of the site, so it's under a couple of the apparatus bays and around the back here. That gives us the ability to put natural light into all of the rooms that need natural light, so we don't have anything buried back in here where we can't get natural light in. The station is really set up, this is, if you were the public, you might come in here. This is that shared zone again right here, and that has from here you can get into a conference room, toilet room. There's the shared physical training room, exercise room, so that's used by police and fire, and they can both access that. There is access to the harbor master's office, but there's a door at this point, so you can't get into the police station without being buzzed in by the administrative assistant. Offices are located right here, so we have the administrative assistant, the chief, detectives and sergeants, and the patrol room are all located right here. We have a break room and some evidence storage that's back in here. These are really support spaces again. This is a locker room, changing room, so it's the same idea that we had at the fire station. In order to accommodate female officers, we have a shared locker room that's for storage of gear only, and then you can do changing in individual changing rooms. We have there's some general storage in here. This is really the back end of the police station. So if you come in on the wrong side of the law, you're going to come into the sally port. And from the Sally Port, you'll be escorted into the booking area. Booking area, they can do processing. From the booking area, there's a search room that's located adjacent. There's an interview room, so they could take somebody in and conduct an interview. And there are 2 cells that are located down here as well. So this is that secure end of the station. Interview room, we have a door where you can also get in from the sort of business part of the station, so that kind of serves both functions. So this is the secure part of the station. This is the working part of the station. Those are kind of support spaces. So has a fairly logical layout. Both of these facilities, we've met with both the police and the fire departments multiple times to go over things, work out fine details. There's a bunch of details I haven't mentioned, like gun lockers, so they can put their guns away in certain parts of the station, exact layouts for how the booking room is going to work, all of those things that we've worked out in great detail. I think everybody's happy with the way we have that functioning now. So that's basically the plans. I put the elevations in here. This is from the construction documents, so they're not as pretty as the models that I showed you earlier, but it's basically the same design that you saw before. So this would be the John Wise Avenue elevation. So you can see there's the fire station. There's the barn, which is the training room. If you go around to the back side, this is the police station. That's the fire station up here. And this is set up with this front piece, which is maybe the sort of, it's a kind of gray collaborative building. That's the piece that's the barn that sits over on the side. That's the apparatus bays. And then when you come around to the apparatus bays, there's the 4 apparatus bays. So it's substantially like what you saw in the models. But we really worked through all the details. Some of the windows are a little different. Some of the spacing's a little different, but substantially the same as was shown earlier. So that's where we are with the design. We are ready to go out to bid. We've had a couple of cost estimates done, and I'm going to turn it over to Tim to talk about cost estimating.
Elevation for a sec. I just want to point out a couple of other things that I just thought to mention too as well. To the elevation page.
Elevations.
Just if it helps. These drawings are instructive because this shows you the grade change here. So this is the limit of the police station underneath because the grade is sloping off here. You see that same in this elevation where the grade slopes off here, and this is the area that the police station takes underneath the fire station. And the fire station here, you can see it's a lot taller. There's also a mechanical mezzanine over part of the floor. This building is taller just because of the training room space. But because of the different uses, there were a lot of different spaces that needed to be accommodated. And the 2-story site also requires an architecturally designed building. It's not a site that's appropriate to just put sort of a prefab building because so much of the design works around the site slope and working with the site. So it's not a big flat level site where you could just put a prefabricated sort of building. So I think it's important to mention that in taking advantage of the site and accommodating both departments, there's a lot of different requirements in the design that really led us to this sort of a design. I did want to reinforce too what Stuart had said about the fire department, and Dan can spit out all the pieces of equipment. Dan, you said, has joined us here. He's our fire chief. That the 8 bays of equipment that you see in there is for exactly what we have. It's not any more room for expansion. And also to touch on the inclusion of bunk rooms in there, it's not even hurricanes or anything like that. We have nor'easters where the causeway floods, something like that, and a lot of our fire personnel will stay for the duration of the storm overnight. And right now they sleep on 2 mangy cots in the tables in the training room. So this will be a little bit nicer accommodation that way. And another point to make about having a combined facility is not only are the shared spaces taken advantage of by both departments, but it gives the town one building to maintain, which is obviously in our favor as far as maintenance costs in the future go. In addition, all the mechanical systems that are incorporated, so there's an emergency generator. If we have 2 buildings, we need 2 emergency generators, things like that. So there's a lot of other things above and beyond just the shared spaces that make a combined facility advantageous. I think that was it for now. I'll interrupt again if I need to. Thank you.
One other thing I thought to mention, as part of this, part of the project budget, we made an allowance for demolition of the existing police and fire station and basically some kind of basic landscaping there. So that is included as part of the cost. That's not something that they'd be coming back to ask for money later on to do. That's part of the project. So.
And then one other thing to mention too is about there's been a lot of questions about the existing home at 11 John Wise Avenue, which is an old barn, timber frame barn. When we started off, we were looking at that and hoping to reuse that as part of the training room and basically re-erecting the timber frame structure in there. But that, after design development went a little ways along, became cost prohibitive, and between the Board of Selectmen and the Town Building Committee elected not to do that. We're still keeping sort of the architectural reference to it as the training room with the barn doors sort of feature there, but there won't be reuse of that existing structure just in an effort to try and minimize some of the costs. We'd rather put that money into services that the departments need in the building.
All right, so Lisa had given sort of an intro on where we are with costs since last May, so I'm going to get into a little bit of the detail on that. So since May, we were at Schematic Design back at town meeting, and we've proceeded with the advancing to design development and performed a cost estimate milestone at that point in time, which was in about July. And then from that point forward, we moved ahead with construction documents, and most recently completed the 60% construction documents phase estimate. Both estimates were done by two independent cost estimators, one that's brought in by the OPM and one that's brought in by the architect. And when we receive those estimates, we bring the team together and review them and what we call reconcile them and make sure that everybody's looking at the scope the same way, there are no misses in the scope, and that we've got everything covered. This summary here is showing in the blue the two 60% construction documents estimate, as well as the variance between the two estimates, and also compares to the design development estimate, which was done back in July, and the variance between those two estimates. So this is really just the backup, sort of rolled up detail of each trade. Within each trade, there's a whole lot of other detail too. These are pretty thick documents, but we tried to pare it down to a simple way to look at the information. So this is essentially builds up the building cost, the hard cost of the building itself. And hopefully we got the second page this time. And so the second page goes into detail on the site work, which includes prepping the site. There's obviously existing stone walls and trees and all that need to be managed. It includes earthwork, exterior improvements, which are paved areas, landscaping, that sort of thing, utilities, and the traffic signal. And then from there, we're also carrying the cost to demolish the building that's on the 11 John Weiss Ave site, as well as abating any hazardous materials. We have done a hazardous materials assessment on that building to identify where there may be asbestos-containing materials, and that estimate is based on what was found in that assessment. And so that totals sort of the hard cost of work. And then there's markups and contingencies applied to that to get the total of the 13,276,912. And then, as Stuart had mentioned, we're also carrying a budget for what will be a second smaller bid package that will include demolishing the existing public safety facility and also abating any hazardous materials within that building. So there were some asbestos that was found in that building as well. And that brings us to the total of 13,438,512. And that's the construction cost. So when we build the total project budget, we use this estimate, the average of the two, in fact, to inform the construction cost, and then build all of the other costs on top of that. And this is a summary of the total project budget. So this is a similar format to what we presented in May, so what we have here is the budget at SD, which is essentially where we were in May, schematic design, and that's the $17,500,000 that Lisa had mentioned. The next column is our current budget, which is the construction costs that we just reviewed, and then all of the other soft costs and contingencies, furnishings and equipment, other owner costs, really anything that's not under the construction contract itself, but is a project-related cost, is captured in these additional line items. So when we total all of those up, it brings us to this $15,947,263 total, and that's as compared to the $17,500,000 for May, which shows that we're just under about a $1.6 million savings from where we estimated the project to be at schematic design. And back in May, we committed to looking at ways that we could bring the costs down, make the building more efficient, look for other opportunities to save costs. Through the design development phase, we did what's called value engineering exercise and looked at all of the opportunities and moved ahead with some of the opportunities that would result in a quality building. We don't want to compromise on quality. We want to meet the programmatic requirements, but just find ways to do it more cost effectively. So that process has yielded us a pretty substantial savings. And then what this is showing is, as Lisa mentioned, the May appropriation was $497,105, which was intended to fund through the bid phase. So when we deduct that from the 15.9, it brings us to the total for the appropriation on Monday, which is just about $15.5 million. So that's the basis for the financial analysis that we'll get into, I think, in the next item on the agenda. So if there are any questions before we get into that, happy to take them now. No? All right.
So the next part of the presentation is Ben from the FinCom is going to walk through some of the work that the FinCom has been doing to understand the best way to finance the project and also assessing the impact to taxpayers so that we can present this information to people as well. Because bottom line, that's what people want to know is what is this going to do to my tax bill. While he's setting up, I'm going to just touch on another couple of procedural points. When we had annual town meeting in May and we were intending to go for funding and then sort of caught an audible and went just to fund the design through construction documents with the intent of having a more fine-tuned number to bring in the fall as we are doing. The way that town meeting and the town election are structured is that the language that goes on the town election ballot, which was held a week after the town meeting, is written 35 days in advance of that because of state requirements. So at the time the ballot language was written, we were intending to go for funding a project like this, which is a debt exclusion, which means that the repayment of this debt gets put on top of the Prop 2.5 tax levy limit for the duration. So it's called a debt exclusion because it's not a permanent tax increase. It's a tax increase just for the duration of the loan that funds this project, not unlike a mortgage that someone would take out for their home. So the ballot requires that if the town is going to do borrowing in excess of the levy limit, that the voters need to approve that at the ballot. So that language was still on the ballot in the election that was held in May. So even though we didn't ask for funding in May, the ballot election, the ballot vote was still valid. And it's important to know that that did pass town election, so the majority of the voters approved that concept of borrowing above and beyond the tax levy limit to fund this project. So that is sort of step 2 of the process. So step 2 has been completed, and September's town meeting, Monday night's town meeting will be step 1 of the process, where town meeting needs to approve with a 2/3 majority that same borrowing. And town meeting actually approves the number that we borrow, and as Ben will get into how that, where the money comes from borrowing or other cash resources that the town has. And we'll talk about that. So that's what is up for vote Monday night. Ben is also going to talk some about the different ways that borrowing can be structured, the different sources you can borrow from. But it's important to remember that that decision remains with the Finance Committee. It's not part of the vote at town meeting. So at town meeting, we're voting on the money and where it comes from, but we're not voting on how debt is financed. It's kind of a subtlety, but it's also important just to remember in context of what Ben is speaking about. He's giving you the background of how the FinCom is arriving at their recommendations, but it's still, there's 3 numbers that he'll talk about, which is what's up for vote on Monday night.
Okay, thank you,
Thanks,
Lisa. So again, my name is Ben Buttrick. I'm chair of the Finance Committee, and so just to give you a little bit of background here, a subset of us on the Finance Committee got together and went through a lot of different scenarios to figure out, how are we going to pay for this? Everybody wants to know how we're going to pay for it, and then what's going to be the impact on taxpayers at the end of the day. And so we went through a number of different scenarios, and then we had a discussion with the Finance Committee to arrive at a recommendation, which we then presented to the Board of Selectmen and to the Town Building Committee. And so what I want to give some background to everybody is how did we arrive at this recommendation, and then we'll go into sort of what the impact is. So number 1, we had 3 goals that we were trying to achieve. First, to minimize the impacts on the taxpayers of Essex, number 1. That's sort of first and foremost. Number 2 is to be able to maintain the town's flexibility by being prudent in terms of how we use cash balances that the town has. And I'll go more into that in a minute, just in terms of that decision. And then number 3 is preserving the town's fiscal short-term and long-term health. When you issue bonds, you're incurring debt over there's sort of an immediate impact, and then there's a long-run impact. And so we want it to be, you have to take into account a lot of considerations when you're issuing debt. So I'll explain a little bit more about that. So those were the 3 goals. Really, at the end of the day, we only have 2 decision points to make, which is how much cash do we want to use in terms of the town's cash balances, and then secondly, how do we issue the debt? How much, or how do we structure the debt? And so I'll explain that. The goals that I mentioned are a little bit at odds with one another, because you can't solve for all 3 of those goals perfectly. Meaning that if your goal is to solely minimize the tax burden on each of the taxpayers, then you would use all cash, or you would use as much cash as you possibly can, and then that sort of hamstrings the town in terms of having cash on hand. It also compromises our debt rating. So you have to sort of strike a balance between trying to achieve all of those goals. So where we ended up landing is, the punchline is that, we had many different scenarios with different types of debt structures over different time frames. And where we landed is the middle scenario, which is scenario 2. So the cost, as you can see, runs across as $15.5 million. The yellow highlight is how much cash do we use? How do we strike the right mix? There's 2 sources of cash in the funding here. One is the sale of real estate funds, the cash balance, which is in excess of $5 million right now. And then there's free cash, which we closed out the fiscal year at about $2 million. And so we have a little bit of a windfall in terms of free cash. So that provided, what we're recommending is to use half of the town's current free cash at $1 million, and then we're recommending a use of $2 million from the sale of real estate fund, which actually leaves more than half of the balance remaining, because one of the considerations here is having that as a rainy day fund affords the town some flexibility to have that money for projects that you may not necessarily be issuing debt for. So it's a very purposeful use of debt to issue bonds to build a public safety building, and interest rates are very favorable right now. So if there is a case to be made that you would borrow as much as you can to take advantage of those interest rates, but that would not be good in terms of the taxpayer impact. So we're trying to balance those there. So what we did was we then modeled these three scenarios. Again, we're landing at the $2 million just in terms of the cash. We also looked at different ways of financing. So, do we want to use really long-term bonds? The town, being a rural community, we have USDA loans that can be done, which are 40-year bonds. They carry a higher interest rate. It would be a considerably higher financing cost for the town over the long run. And plus it would push the debt mapping without getting too complicated. But we've got a lot of different projects that need to be funded over the life of these bonds. And so we kind of looked at everything and mapped it out. We didn't feel very comfortable using 40-year bonds. And so most towns, we looked at what other towns and municipalities have been issuing. It's sort of been in the 20 to 30-year range. So we used, for the purpose of this modeling, a 30-year bond assumption at a 2 3/4%. So basically what that means is, and there's some, I'm going to scroll down here. Okay. So I think the number that is really meaningful here is that this is all else being equal. So, there's a lot of different factors that go into determining the tax impact on sort of the average taxpayer. So what this is doing is just limiting the impact of the debt. And what you see is that for the average taxpayer in Essex, it's about a $500 increase on an annual basis to the tax bill in year one. And the way that the debt gets structured is actually the impact declines over time, over the 30-year life. So you sort of feel it most in the first year, because that's when most of the principal, you start out by paying the principal off sooner, and then the principal runs down over time. And so for the year one increase to the town's mill rate, which is the amount of tax per $1,000, and it's a function of property values in terms of what the tax is, it's 87 cents. So if you look at the increase, this number down here, the year one increase will be about 5.7, although over the life of the loan, it's about 4.44. So that gives you a sense of the impact, kind of how it'll impact taxpayers. And I think that's pretty much it.
Can I interrupt for 1
Yep.
sec? I just want to, the FinCom is like, there are two different ways to pay off a debt, and one is equal payment and one is equal principal. The equal principal is what the FinCom is looking at, and that's the one where in the overall life of the loan you pay a whole lot less in interest. An equal payment loan is what a typical homeowner mortgage is like. So when you start off in your mortgage, you're paying mostly interest and some principal, and as you pay this principal off, your interest goes down and your principal goes up, but you're paying the same amount over all 360 months of a typical 30-year loan. With the equal principal, the principal payment is the same and the interest rate is higher, but as you pay that interest, you pay the principal down quicker, the interest drops, which is why you're seeing that from, so the average here, year 1 to 10 is 466, whereas in the last 10 years it's 315. So that drops off over the life of the loan. So, and the average is really the number to look at, or this is the 30-year impact to a homeowner.
And the reason why we chose the level principal, not to get too technical here, but when you look at the long run of projects that the town needs to finance, we're going to have infrastructure costs down the road, over the course of the next 10, 15, 20 years. What you don't want to have, you don't want to have a situation where the amount of debt service you have spikes up in the out years. So the extent to which you can pay things down sooner costs the town less, but it's also better for our bond rating and also for just being able to finance things going forward. So, we thought about that. We arrived at the notion of not using the 40-year loans, but using more conventional municipal bond issues because they have lower interest rates, and to go with level principal. So then really it becomes the cash. How much cash do you use? And that's what we showed in these different scenarios here, which is, how does it impact it? There's a case to be made for using more cash. There's also a case to be made for using less cash. And it depends on your perspective, really. So again, we're trying to strike a balance here. So did I forget anything else, Lisa?
I don't think so, but I'm sure people have questions.
Yeah, so I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yeah.
Who you want to
Whether
hold?
they're finance questions, architectural questions, Paul is here to answer any questions about the police department. Dan is being shy over there in the wings, but can answer any questions about the fire department.
By the way, can I mention one more thing, Lisa? That is that if you go to the town's website, you'll see you can click into, from the home page of the website, you can click into the public safety project information, and there's a link to the committees page. That grid that I just put up is on the website over here in terms of the recommendations, so you can access it if you want to.
And as are every other visual that's ever been presented in a meeting here, so there's a lot to wade through there.
Yeah.
So that said, do you folks have questions about anything, or want to see any of the visuals again? Sure.
Has it been considered to make this like a green building, for example, put solar in, or at least make provisions that it could be added later, storage facilities, batteries, or is it like way too expensive at this moment?
So,
You want to answer?
yeah, I can answer. We are not pursuing any sort of like LEED certification, but we're trying to design a green, sustainable building. So that means we have a pretty high level of insulation for the building envelope. We've got good tight windows. We're doing a energy efficient mechanical system. So this is basically a heat pump system. So, and the building is set up so that in the future, if you wanted to add photovoltaics, the structure is in place that you could do that in the future. But photovoltaics are not part of what we're doing now. So overall, I think we have a pretty green building. We're looking at using renewable materials wherever possible. So I think we've done quite a bit.
Another consideration there that when you go for LEED certification, it's usually an extra expense, and we're
Yeah, I
trying
wasn't looking
to.
at certification, but I think there's some funding one could probably try to pursue where you get some help with if you design something that has solar panels. I can't speak to specifics, but I just wondered if that has been
Yeah,
thought of.
it's been thought of, and there's, at a higher level, the town is looking at different, not even related to the public safety building, but overall for the town infrastructure is looking at different ways to structure our energy uses. We're a small town, so larger towns can actually build solar farms and make it effective, but there are ways that a smaller municipality can buy into someone else's solar field or other renewable sources of energy. And I know when I was on the Board of Selectmen, and I believe they still are, looking at that as sort of a long-term goal to be energy efficient as a town. So it's something that's definitely on the radar. We're just, and like Stuart said, the roof is designed to accommodate that, if and when in the future it becomes advisable to put something on the roof. So.
Yeah, there's a prime solar exposure there, for example, right? Thank you.
Other questions? Sure.
Maybe a question for the finance committee.
Sure.
What was the percent increase for the school building a couple years ago? Was that around 9%? I can't remember. The tax increase per family.
Right. I don't recall off the top of my head. It was more than the 4.5% though. I'm pretty certain about that.
I just was wondering,
Yeah.
so with that increase plus this increase, I'm wondering what that, does that, anyone have a rough estimate, is like 15%? 13, 14?
I can get a factual answer for you if maybe we can connect and I can send you an email after this.
Yeah, that's probably something we'd like to be able to talk about at town meeting as well.
Yeah, I just thought before I sit in front of 500 people. That's in front of
Yeah, no, I know. I mean, one of the pieces of analysis that we did though is if you take all of the town's debt now for everything, backdated up to this point in time and everything that we know, there's a debt schedule and you can map that out over time and you can look and you can see each year what the town's debt service is. And if you assume that the town's revenues are going to go up by 2.5% each year, you can actually model how much debt service each year. And it's a little bit volatile in terms of how it jumps around. And so the context of what taxpayers are being asked to bear, I think, is an important consideration here. And then also what we think we're going to have to be dealing with going down the road. Because what we don't want is sort of a certain years where the town's debt burden spikes because of various projects. So we're trying to keep that as smooth as possible. So
that was actually my next question.
Okay.
You can finish, I didn't mean to interrupt you. But,
No, that's okay.
So this is potentially for 30 years, correct?
Right.
And so in that 30 years, and I know this is somewhat of a, not really be able to answer, but what are some of the potential future, maybe another tax increase? No, we don't have to spend more money, do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But we just front loading and then in the next 30 years we won't be able to do anything because we'll be broke because of
That's why we want to do the
School and
principal.
fire safety.
That's why we want to do the level principal, because over time, the debt runs down in terms of past things. So then you can layer new things down the road, new projects. And so what we know is there's going to be some infrastructure cost for the town. Ultimately down the road, there's the elementary school that's been talked about. We carry the cost of the district middle high school, which actually starts to run off, which is good because that allows some flexibility. So that's what we're looking at is all of these different projects. And there's studies being done, and that's what we've been working with Brendan on in terms of, he's not here now, but scoping out what should we be assuming for infrastructure costs, for example. And so we're being pretty conservative. And, in other words, we're assuming that these are going to be big numbers, looking 10, 15 years out, because we don't want a situation where we're hamstrung as a town in terms of what we can do. So that's part of that, striking the balance. So, but I can get the answer for you on that. The impact of the school, recent school construction. Yeah, and then what the combined impact is. Well, it's not really a new tax rate. Each year, the amount of taxes are a function of the different costs for the town. So probably by the middle of next year.
Right. So what happens when a construction project goes underway? And right now, Manchester's Memorial School is under construction. So you don't just drop the debt on taxpayers. That is sort of incurred as, unlike a home mortgage where one day you buy a house and then all of a sudden you have that. When you're doing a construction project, the contractor is paid as the project is completed, so the debt sort of accumulates until the project's completed, and then the full debt service is there. That said, to add to what Ben's talked about, I know this regional school district is sensitive to trying to keep the school debt as level as they can. We're coming down off the middle high school debt, as the elementary school debt is sort of, the Manchester's debt is ramping up. And the idea is to maintain and upgrade Essex Elementary with a focus on not so much the building, but on educational parity, so that the Essex Elementary students are getting the same quality education that the Manchester students are getting in their school, their new school, so that all the students will go into the middle high school with the same educational background, even though our building is older. And then, so those will be minimal cost over time, just trying to maintain Essex Elementary. And then when the time comes for replacing Essex Elementary, the high school, middle school debt will have already gone off, and that will be the time that Essex Elementary, so as the middle high school debt ramps down at the very end, Essex Elementary will ramp up. So they're trying to level that off to lessen that impact. And I know our sewer project is kind of winding down on that. So that is one little bright note, right? Exactly. And the other thing with infrastructure too, that it's tricky with both our water and our sewer, which is a lot of our main infrastructure, in that not everyone uses it. So some of that, and that's something that needs to be worked out, is what portion of that goes on the tax rate for the whole town, and what portion of that is funded through betterments or assessments to the users of the water and sewer. So those are some conversations that it's also the Board of Public Works has a large role in that. So there's a lot of moving parts, but we're trying to get things done and not make it too onerous for people. Regarding the public safety building, something that I didn't touch on that is important to emphasize as well is that as of February 2019, the state has put in place workplace standards that are, they're OSHA standards. It's not OSHA enforcing them, it's the OSHA enforcing, it's the state enforcing OSHA equivalent standards. So it's not OSHA looking at us, but the State Department of Labor Services is looking at us and holding us to essentially OSHA standards. Our station meets virtually none of them. It's really insufficient in so many ways, and it needs to be replaced, and we need to have larger adequate facilities for both departments to meet a lot of these standards. So the time is now, because right now they're not fining municipalities for deficiencies, but in the future, if you're not taking steps to address those deficiencies, then you will begin to get fined. So we would be trying to put Band-Aids on the building we have and never really bringing it up to the standards that it needs to be. So we'd be putting money into a poor facility and still probably paying fines on that facility because it would still be non-compliant. So it's really time, and it's long overdue, and we're just about there. We have a fully designed project and we're ready to go. The hope of the town meeting vote, well, the hope for a successful town meeting vote would be that if it's funded, it goes to bid on the 25th of September. Bids are due the beginning of November. The bid could be awarded in time for the contractor to start work this winter, before the winter really sort of sets in. Clear the ground, get into the ground, start the foundation, which is a lot of the concrete work that wants to happen before the really deep freezing weather. So that's the way the schedule's been set up. The building project is about a 14-month
14-month schedule,
right. Yeah, 14-month construction schedule, and then there's some time for fit up and furnishings before the departments can move in, which would be early spring of 2021. Any other questions? I'm sure there's 1,000 things I forgot, and I'm sorry, but if people have questions, that's great. Sure.
One more about expansion. You said the existing equipment fits in the base, for the fire station. What if, are we expecting to need much more, like an extra ladder or?
No, I can explain that. Can you have, actually, I can touch on that. So I'm running
And what
20
happens
years.
if you do?
On this back, we'll go back to it.
Yep. I'll use it later. All right, watch your eyes. So, we're talking about vehicles. Currently, we have 7 vehicles in a boat. So you can see the drawing here. Here's the small boat. Our ladder truck, currently, which we have 2 engines. Oh, that's 2 engine bays. A squad truck, a tanker truck, and 2 ambulances. So I'll go quickly through why we have what we have. We have 2 ambulances because quite often we use 2 ambulances. So the ambulances are self-sufficient. They operate on their own. They're built for billable services for transport, so they kind of support themselves. We have 2 ambulances. One is typically we maintain one up until 10 years old, then we trade it in and we replace that and we rotate vehicles through. So there's 2 ambulances. There's an engine and a tanker and another engine here, and I'll kind of go through fire suppression 101 quickly. We need a water supply to fire. If it's inside the hydrant lines in the town of Essex, we're fine. Last hydrant on John Wise Avenue is the golf course. Last hydrant on Southern Avenue is both ways fire. Last hydrant on Harlow Street is at the very beginning of Harlow Street. So all the areas come to point, all Church Street, John Wise Avenue towards the line, Southern Avenue towards the Manchester line, all areas without hydrants. Typical fire scenario, we typically need an engine at the fire and another engine to get the water to the other engine. So it takes 2 vehicles plus a ladder truck if needed. We're unique in this community because we don't have water everywhere. So we have a tanker truck. We carry 2,200 gallons of water on that. We shuttle it, we go back to the hydrant, dump it into a portable tank, suck out of the tank, and that's kind of how we would put a fire up beyond the hydrant. So that's why we have that amount of vehicles in the boat, quite obviously, because we're a community with water. We use it quite often, either people who get grounded or get lost. The harbor master also has a boat, but their boat is bigger. Sometimes this has some good uses. It's easy to maneuver. We have a rescue on the lake. We can drive it up with our squad truck. We can basically lift it up and put it in the water. So that's why we have that other vehicle. In this area here, like I said, those are the 8 vehicles. Will Essex ever need any more vehicles? Probably not. This is, accommodating what we have right now. That's what we physically have in that building. You'd be surprised unless you walk through there. But usually when you walk through there, you're walking through, you have about this much room to walk between vehicles. And then also, we don't currently have any room to the sides of the vehicle to put any type of exhaust for moving systems. Current standards are to have a means that the truck start, the exhaust goes out through some hoses and it's escape to the outside and not into the atmosphere so everybody breathes it. They're finding that diesel soot and exhaust from vehicles like that are a huge carcinogen. A lot of firefighters get lung disease. Also, just secondhand carcinogens off of turnout gear. We do have an extractor now, which is basically a commercial grade wash machine. But we don't have any locker rooms. We don't have a decontamination room. We do have the dryer and the washer, but some of the other stuff. Guys who come from a fire, they're all soot or they're all whatever. It could be anything. It could be biohazards, whatever. They're not taking showers. They don't have a shower, so they have to bring it home to the family. So in this here, you can see there's a decon room, which is basically, what is that, about 8 feet square, if I remember right?
Yeah.
Basically, it's a shower, just a big room where somebody can walk in if they're going to get gear on there contaminated, or they can strip their gear off outside, go in there and do the gross decon, and then go into the other areas to decon. This would be the area here to clean and launder your gear, and then storage for your bunker gear. You also find bunker gear off gases. Even if you wash it after a fire, it off gases a lot of byproducts. All the stuff in plastics that are in fires, in different materials. It's not your grandmother's house anymore. It's all man-made materials that just give off a lot of toxins. So in this area here, when it's stored, it's all great and well, but it has to have an area to exhaust those fumes that it's giving off as it's just sitting there resting. Currently, our gear is stored, well, here's the 2 trucks. So our gear is stored like this far away, so when the truck starts, the exhaust actually blows into it. So we don't have any other way to put these things. We don't have the room in this building to make any type of accommodations to try to resolve these issues, and that's why this is important. I guess that's it, basically. As you can see, this locker room, as I think Stuart touched on, I mean, that's for storage. Somebody gets contaminated, they have clean uniforms, change of clothes. Plus, they have the capabilities in here to wash their items and not take them home to their family. Training room, people always say it looks awful big. We have upward of 40 people, and if we have fire academy classes there, they could be 50 people. So it's not uncommon for us to have 40 people in a room. That's a little bit more than that seating wise, but it's really not that much bigger than our room that we have now. So, and then some of the other support areas, just generalized equipment storage, a workshop, a janitor's closet. Secure storage is like new turnout gear. Typical set of turnout gear, if you outfit a firefighter, it's about $2,500. So you don't tend to leave that stuff laying around. You'd like to secure it. Medical equipment storage, should be secured because we have some medicines and other medical equipment that needs to be secured. And then just a small radio room, which would be basically where people would congregate. If the vehicle had already left and they were waiting to see if they needed another vehicle, they would go in here and monitor the transmissions on the radio and decide to whether they need to bring the other piece of equipment. And the idea is, as I think you pointed out, this is kind of the red dirty area. It transitions, it gets into the green area. People who have dirty gear on out here aren't supposed to go in here. That doesn't make sense. It'd be like going to your house and sitting in your couch and turning your turn out here, so you shouldn't be going in that area. Any questions? I can give Paul a pointer now.
Yeah, well, since we're on film, why don't we give a quick walkthrough for the police station and the chief. Taking the TV is filming very kindly for us so that other people who couldn't make it this evening can see as well.
Okay, I'm short, so I'm gonna get closer. Okay, as we spoke of before, first of all, right here, as you can see, we have an area for a garage where, in the wintertime, for instance, a lot of times what will happen is, and we will have people comment about it, how we may have to leave the cruisers running in the wintertime. A lot of times when we leave them running, because if we're inside doing a report or what have you, and we have to go out in any sort of a hurry, we don't want to have to get into a vehicle where the windows are all iced up and what have you, because then it's going to delay our response time. Right over here, also, this will also double as, we'll probably use this for some storage areas, a storage area as well. We have several different things. We have a signboard. We may put in here. We have light towers. We're not sure what'll fit in there, but we're going to try to put them in there and keep them out of the elements in the winter. Right now, a lot of times we keep them down at the DPW building, down at the DPW property, excuse me, and they're near the salt shed. And what happens is the salt air and what have you will actually start to cause them to rust. We've had to completely refurbish our light tower because it got pretty rusty down there, and you couldn't undo the bolts and what have you to lift up the lights. Right here we'll have an area where we'll have some property storage. When somebody brings property in and what have you, we can put it right in this area, which we're desperate for space right now. As you can see right here, here's the sally port. As Stu would say, this is where when you come in, when you're on the wrong side of the law, you might come into here. Okay. So, and this is nice because what this will do is, if the officer is making an arrest, we can come right in here and we can shut the door, so we don't have to worry about somebody escaping. Shut the door and then come in through here with the arrestee, and right here you can do the booking process. You'll do your fingerprinting, you'll take your photographs. There'll be a computer down there where they can start the report. They can enter the individual's demographics. Then what we'll do is we go in here. Here's where you would search them. You would make sure they don't have anything on them. Obviously, you search them several times. You make an arrest because you never know where someone might hide weapons. Over here, if you're not interviewing them, if it's just an arrest, like say an operator under the influence of alcohol, whatever, and there's no reason to interview them, you'll bring them right in here to the cells. There's 2 cells. There's sound and sight separated, in case you have a male, female, what have you in here, which is really nice because we don't have that right now. And just so, for those of you that don't know, we have a processing room, which the selectmen were kind enough to, and the town was kind enough to fund for us, where we can now process individuals when we make an arrest. if we have them for under 6 hours, then we can process them and we can bail them right from here. If for some reason they're being held, or we're gonna have them longer for 6 hours for whatever reason, then we have to take them to Middleton Jail right now, because we don't have our own cells. If we have a protective custody, which is if somebody's too intoxicated and they're considered incapacitated, and we have nowhere to take them and nobody to watch them, let's say it's a female, we go to Wenham with a protective custody. If we go to Wenham with a protective custody, we have to send 2 police officers. And we sit there, we'll have to sit there with them. And Wenham is kind enough to let us do that, but that's 2 police officers that have to be out of town. It's probably gonna be overtime that we're paying to monitor that individual. And for those of you that don't know, you can keep someone in protective custody for up to 12 hours. So, and if you give them a breathalyzer and they register a 1.0 or above after 12 hours, we're gonna put them in protective custody all over again until they're under that 1.0, or somebody can come and get them. So anyway, these are the cells. Here's where we can do our interviews. We can interview people. We can bring them in, like Stu said, we can bring them in from here if they're not in custody. If they're in custody, we'll bring them in from this direction, and you can interview them right there. This will have cameras in it where you can record the interviews, because there's case law that for whatever reason, there's case law, and we have to videotape recording interviews when we interview somebody. Over here, you can come over here, you can see we have a little bit of a break room, which is nice, because right now we have the old dispatch room, which doubles as a break room and temporary evidence room. So this will be nice for the officers just to have a separate area to be able to do that. You come into here, you process your evidence, and then there's your evidence storage. And there'll be lockers, that slide through lockers, which will take place of the temporary custody, the temporary evidence room, which is the old dispatch. In those lockers, if an officer has some sort of evidence that he wants to enter into evidence, you come in, there's a 2-sided locker. You open the door, you put the evidence in there. Once the officer shuts that, he or she no longer can access that evidence. That's when the evidence officer can come in from the other side, access it, and put it from temporary evidence into permanent evidence. And we have to do that for accreditation purposes as well. Chain of custody, very important. We could experience a major lawsuit if we didn't have that system in effect. As you can see, you come over here, there's your server room, and this is something computers aren't my thing, so that would be something that Dan would have to explain to you. And then you'll have the court officer here. Court officer will have his own office, and you'll have plenty of file storage cabinets and what have you, which is what he needs. Arrest files would be in there, locked up, because that's another thing under accreditation. You have to have any arrest files have to be locked up, and only so many people can have access to it. As you can see, there'll be a patrol room here. You can see there'll be different desks set up and what have you. And this would be able to have several officers would be able to have their own space in there and be able to do their reports and store reports and what have you. You come down here, there'll be patrol equipment. Could be anything like radar guns. Could be an area where we store the expandable batons, handcuffs, anything like that we issue would be in here. In here is an armory. If you ever come into our station, right now you'd see we have a gun cabinet. It's locked, it's secure, but it's not big enough, and it really, we also have, some of our officers in the past have been certified armorers where they could repair any firearms defects that we have. Over here you've got general storage, and that'd be good for us. Right now we have a secure storage area down at the mini storage units off of Western Avenue. We're very fragmented. We need to bring everything together. We have to, for different things, we have to go to different places as I've spoken. We may have to go to DPW to pick up equipment. We may have to get down to the storage unit to get files and other equipment that we have down there, so we're all over the map right now. And then as you can see, the detectives and the sergeants will have their own office right there where they can work together. that would be my office, and you see a little table where we can sit and talk. Okay? The administrative assistant, Mary Ellen, would be right in here, and if you can see right there, that is like a bulletproof window. There'll be a little tray there, so Mary Ellen can't get harmed, and somebody can put paperwork and what have you under there. She would also be able to buzz people in. They'll have to check in with her if she's there. If not, then dispatch would call us back. There's the shared physical training room. This would be the police and fire would be using this. And this, like we spoke of, it's good to keep the police officers and firefighters in good shape. And the other thing is they'll tend to be around more often. So if something happens, they can just go right out and they can hop in the fire truck, or in our case, hop in a police car. Maybe after they shower. As you come down here, you can see, similar to the fire department, we have shared lockers. This is male and female, which is smart because what this does is it allows it to not have two separate locker rooms. And then you have the changing rooms here where you can shower, two separate changing rooms, which is nice because, again, rather than have two separate areas, because we never know how many females and how many males we're going to have on at one time. What else? And as you can see, this is, as Stu had mentioned, this is the area where you come in down below from behind, or you can come in right up top here and come down the stairs, and there's the elevator. And that's about it. We have a conference room right here that we can use to speak, talk to several people at a time, or the fire department can use it as well. Anything else? Anybody have any questions? Just yours, Stu?
Well, if there aren't any more questions, thank you all for coming. Appreciate your interest. And as we've mentioned before, all this information is on the town website under the town building committee's link, and that's provided on the homepage. So thank you everyone for coming. See you Monday night.